Seattle-Tacoma International Airport rose like a monument to modern arrogance. Glass walls stretched skyward, catching the gray Pacific Northwest light and refracting it into cold, sterile brilliance. Steel beams crossed overhead like ribs in the skeleton of some massive creature, humming softly with the movement of thousands of travelers passing beneath. To most people, it was just another airport. To Arya Blackwell, it was a proving ground. She moved through the terminal alone. No security detail, no assistants whispering schedules into wireless earpieces, no designer luggage announcing importance from across the room. Instead, Arya wore a pair of washed-out charcoal leggings stretched thin at the knees. A navy hoodie, oversized and fraying at the cuffs, hung loosely from her shoulders. The fabric had faded unevenly, like it had lived a long life before today. Her running shoes were salt-stained, their once white soles dulled to a tired gray. Her hair was pulled into a careless knot that leaned slightly to one side, secured by nothing more than habit. Thick blue light glasses sat on her face, hiding eyes that missed nothing. In one hand, she carried a paper cup of airport coffee, lukewarm, bitter, and aggressively mediocre. In the other, a scuffed canvas duffel bag, the kind sold in campus bookstores and thrift shops. To the passing crowd, she looked like a woman who had wandered into the wrong terminal, a budget traveler, a standby passenger, someone who didn't quite belong. That was exactly the point. Arya slowed near a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the runway. A wide-body aircraft gleamed outside, its fuselage freshly polished, its tail emblazoned with the elegant crest of Orex Skies, a brand that marketed itself as the pinnacle of refined air travel. Luxury, discretion, standards. That's what the ads promised. Arya took a sip of the coffee and grimaced. "Let's see," she murmured to herself, "how deep the rot goes." 3 weeks earlier, she had finalized the acquisition, a quiet deal, no press conference, no champagne photos, just signatures, wire transfers, and a controlling stake slid neatly under the radar. Orex Skies, the boutique airline adored by executives and celebrities alike, now belonged to Altura Air Group, and Altura Air Group belonged to her. Internal audits had raised concerns, anonymous complaints buried in HR archives, unresolved customer disputes, patterns that suggested something darker than simple arrogance. The gold standard, it seemed, only applied to passengers who looked expensive, so Arya decided to test it herself. She stopped in front of the first-class check-in counter for Flight 714 to Tokyo. Behind the polished marble desk stood Grant Holloway. Grant was immaculate. His dark hair was slicked back with precision, not a strand out of place. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, the airline pen on his lapel catching the light every time he moved. He leaned slightly toward a female colleague, laughing softly as he spoke about a weekend house out east. "And the chef flew in from Milan," Grant said, grinning. "Honestly, if you're going to summer in the Hamptons, you have to do it properly." His colleague laughed on cue. Arya cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "Checking in for Flight 714, first class." The laughter stopped. Grant didn't look at her face. His eyes dropped instead, to the frayed edge of her hoodie, to the scuffed shoes, to the canvas bag resting against her leg. Something sharp flickered across his mouth. A smile, but not the welcoming kind. "Economy check-in is through those doors," Grant said, pointing vaguely to the far end of the terminal. Long walk to the left, sweetie. His voice was smooth, practiced, polite enough to sound professional, condescending enough to sting. This lane is reserved for premier guests. You're blocking access for people who actually have tickets. I have a ticket, Arya replied evenly. Seat 1A, Arya Blackwell. Grant exhaled loudly as if burdened by the sheer inconvenience of her existence. He turned to his keyboard and began typing with exaggerated force. Blackwell, Blackwell, he muttered. Ah, here we are. He tilted his head, pretending to read. Well, that's interesting. Arya waited. There appears to be a system discrepancy, Grant said, finally looking up. His eyes were cold now, calculating. Seat 1A is reserved for a Mr. Blackwell, a long-standing client, clearly a businessman. He smiled thinly. I'm reassigning you to 42F, middle seat. He slid a boarding pass across the counter. It's still on the plane, which is honestly more than you should expect dressed like that. I booked 1A, Arya said quietly. Check the digital signature. Grant's smile vanished. I don't need to check anything, he snapped. Take the seat in the back or stay on the ground. We have a reputation to maintain. For a moment, Arya simply looked at him. Then she picked up the boarding pass. No problem, she said. She turned away. As she walked towards security, she pulled out her phone and typed a short message, encrypted, precise. Grant Holloway, check-in supervisor, gate 12. Document his interactions with the next 3 passengers. She hit send. And then she smiled. The test had begun. Security was routine. Arya Blackwell passed through the scanner without incident, her canvas duffel rolling lazily along the belt like it had done 100 times before in 100 different airports. No alarms, no second looks, no suspicion. Which, in itself, was ironic. She was one of the most powerful figures in global aviation at that very moment, yet she moved through the system unseen, unremarkable, unimportant, unacknowledged. She slipped her shoes back on, took another sip of her cooling coffee, and followed the overhead signs toward Gate 12. The gate area was already crowded. First-class passengers clustered near the priority lane, their luggage pristine, their clothing curated. Designer coats draped casually over arms. Watches that cost more than most people's cars flashed subtly as hands gestured mid-conversation. Arya slowed her pace. She felt it immediately. The shift. Eyes slid over her and away again, faster this time. Conversations dipped just a half note lower as she passed. A woman in heels nudged a companion and whispered something that made him snort softly. No one said anything outright. They didn't have to. Gate 12 came into view, roped off with velvet stanchions that separated priority boarding from the rest of the terminal like a velvet-clad border checkpoint. Behind the counter stood 2 agents. One was young, nervous, clearly new. The other was Grant Holloway. Arya felt a flicker of something, satisfaction maybe, as she saw him again. His posture had shifted since check-in, straighter, more alert. He stood closer to the boarding scanner now, arms folded, surveying the crowd like a nightclub bouncer deciding who was worthy of entry. His eyes landed on her. They narrowed. She stepped into the priority lane. Grant didn't move at first. He waited until she was close enough for others to hear. This lane is for first-class passengers, he said loudly. I know, Arya replied. Grant leaned forward, resting his palms on the counter. You were already reassigned. You need to board with your group. I was reassigned without cause and incorrectly. A few heads turned. Grant smiled. The kind of smile people wore when they knew the rules and knew how to bend them without consequence. "Ma'am," he said patiently, as if explaining something very simple to a child, "this is a private airline. We reserve the right to correct booking errors." "This wasn't an error," Arya said. "It was a judgment." That did it. Grant straightened fully now. "You're causing a disturbance," he said. "Step aside." "I'm standing exactly where my ticket entitles me to stand," Arya replied. The nervous junior agent glanced between them. "Grant?" he murmured. Grant ignored him. "Let me be very clear," Grant said, lowering his voice just enough to sound threatening rather than loud. "If you continue this behavior, I'll have security escort you out of the priority area." "On what grounds?" Arya asked. Grant's gaze flicked to her clothes again. "On the grounds that you don't belong here." A murmur rippled through the waiting area. Someone behind Arya whispered, "Oh, wow." Another voice muttered, "This should be good." Arya took a step closer to the counter. "You've now escalated this from discrimination to harassment," she said calmly. "I'd advise you to choose your next words carefully." Grant laughed. Actually laughed. "Listen," he said, gesturing vaguely at her hoodie. "This airline caters to a certain clientele. We don't apologize for standards." "Standards based on appearance," Arya said. "Based on experience," Grant corrected. "People who fly first class understand the culture." "And what culture is that?" Arya asked. Grant leaned in. "Money recognizes money." Arya nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" Grant scoffed. "For saying that out loud." She stepped aside, not retreating, just repositioning, and watched as Grant waved forward the next passenger in line. A man in a tailored charcoal suit approached, rolling a sleek aluminum carry-on. Grant's demeanor changed instantly. "Welcome back, sir," Grant said warmly. "We've got you in 2D today." The man smiled. "Appreciate it." Grant printed his boarding slip without hesitation. Then a woman followed. Pearls, cream trench coat, oversized sunglasses. "Mrs. Klein," Grant said, almost bowing. "Always a pleasure." Marjorie Klein smiled indulgently. "Tell me I still have my window," she said. "Of course," Grant replied. "Wouldn't dream of moving you." Arya watched it all, noted the speed, the tone, the contrast. Her phone vibrated gently in her pocket. A single reply. Recording active. Good. Boarding was announced moments later. "Now boarding first class and priority passengers." Grant gestured grandly toward the lane. "First class only," he said pointedly, eyes flicking to Arya. She stepped forward anyway. Grant blocked her path. "I told you." "You reassigned my seat without authority. You refused to verify my ticket, and you've publicly stated that access is based on how much someone looks like they're worth." The junior agent swallowed. "Grant, maybe we should just—" "No," Grant snapped. "She's testing us." Arya almost smiled. "Testing you," she thought, "and you're failing spectacularly." She handed over the crumpled boarding pass. "Scan it," she said. Grant didn't take it. "I don't need to." "Scan it," she repeated. Passengers were openly watching now. Phones hovered discreetly at chest height. Grant felt it too, the attention, the pressure. He snatched the pass and scanned it. The machine beeped. Green. A pause. Then, error, seat mismatch. Grant exhaled triumphantly. "There," he said, turning the screen so others could see. "System discrepancy, as I explained. That error exists because you reassigned it." Grant leaned closer, lowering his voice again. "You should have accepted the downgrade. Now you're embarrassing yourself." "I'm documenting you," Arya replied. Grant stiffened. "You can't record staff." "I'm not," Arya said. "The airport is." She nodded toward the ceiling. Grant glanced up instinctively. Bad move. His jaw tightened. You need to leave the gate area immediately. Or what? Arya asked. Or I'll report you for interference with boarding procedures. Arya stepped back. Please do. Grant blinked. What? Call it in, Arya said. I'd like this on record. For the first time since this started, uncertainty crept into Grant's expression. But pride won. He grabbed his radio. Gate 12 to operations. We have a non-compliant passenger refusing boarding instructions. A crackle of static. Understood. Escalate as needed. Grant clipped the radio back onto his belt. There, he said smugly. You happy? Very, Arya replied. Boarding continued around them. First-class passengers streamed past, some avoiding eye contact, others openly smirking. Marjorie Klein paused as she passed Arya. She looked her up and down slowly. Oh, she said lightly, they really do let anyone try these days. Grant chuckled. Arya met Marjorie's gaze. Enjoy your flight, she said. It may be your last. Marjorie laughed dismissively and continued down the jet bridge. Grant rolled his eyes. Delusional, he muttered. When boarding finished, Grant turned back to Arya. Final call, he said. You're not welcome on this flight. Arya looked past him, to the jet bridge, to the aircraft beyond. Then she nodded. All right, she said. Grant relaxed slightly. She pulled out her phone again. Typed one final message. Proceed to Phase 2, Cabin Behavior Audit. She slipped the phone away and walked calmly down the jet bridge. Grant opened his mouth to stop her, but she was already gone. The jet bridge hummed beneath Arya Blackwell's feet as she stepped forward. The farther she walked, the quieter it became. The muffled chaos of the terminal faded behind her, replaced by the soft mechanical breathing of the aircraft itself. Conditioned air flowed gently through hidden vents, carrying the faint scent of leather, citrus cleaner, and something floral meant to signal luxury. The entrance to the plane opened before her like a velvet-lined mouth. Inside, first class gleamed. Cream-colored leather seats curved elegantly along wide aisles. Polished mahogany panels reflected warm overhead lighting. Chrome accents shone softly, catching the eye without demanding attention. It was less a cabin and more a curated experience, designed to reassure the wealthy that they were separate from everyone else. At the door stood Celeste Rowan. She was tall, poised, immaculately groomed. Her blonde hair was twisted into a flawless bun, secured with pins that hadn't shifted in years. Her uniform pressed sharp enough to cut glass. The Orex Sky's insignia rested proudly at her collarbone. Celeste smiled, or rather, she arranged her face into the shape of a smile. "Welcome aboard," she said, her voice smooth and professional. Then her eyes dropped. The smile died instantly. It didn't fade, it collapsed. Her gaze lingered on Arya's hoodie, the scuffed shoes, the canvas bag. Something hardened behind her eyes, like a door slamming shut. Celeste stepped subtly but deliberately into the aisle. "Yes?" she asked. "I'm boarding, seat 1A. Celeste didn't look at the boarding pass Arya offered. She didn't need to. "I think you've made a mistake," Celeste said coolly. "Economy is further back." "I'm aware. I'm not seated there." Celeste's lips tightened. "This cabin is reserved," she lowered her voice, "because of guests who understand the standards of Orex Skies." "And what standard is that?" Arya asked. Celeste leaned closer, the scent of expensive perfume sharp now. "Discretion," she said. "Presentation. Class." Her eyes flicked once more to Arya's clothes. "You're distracting." Arya blinked. "Distracting?" she repeated. We have a senator and a major tech executive on board. They didn't pay $30,000 to share oxygen with someone dressed like they wandered in from a bus terminal. A few nearby passengers glanced over. One man paused mid-step, pretending to adjust his jacket as he listened. Arya kept her voice level. The clothes shouldn't matter. Celeste laughed. It was sharp, ugly, uncontrolled.
They are the only thing that matters, she hissed. Standards are what keep us elite. She straightened, regaining her professional mask. Now move to the back before I have the air marshal explain the concept of interfering with flight crew. Arya didn't move. I'd like to speak to the captain, she said. Celeste's composure cracked again. The laugh this time was louder. The captain doesn't have time for peasants, she said. But if you insist on making a scene, I'll bring him out to remove you personally. Behind Arya, a voice chimed in. Oh, for heaven's sake. A woman brushed past her shoulder, nearly knocking the canvas bag from Arya's grip. Marjorie Klein. She wore a heavy faux fur coat despite the climate-controlled cabin. Gold chains layered around her neck clinked softly as she moved. Her handbag, small, rigid, unmistakably expensive, swung casually from her wrist. Marjorie stopped beside Celeste. Tell me this person isn't staying up here, she said, eyes wrinkling with distaste. It ruins the vibe. Celeste's tone changed instantly. Of course not, Mrs. Klein, she purred. Just a misunderstanding. She turned back to Arya, the warmth gone. Last warning, Celeste said. Row 42 or off the aircraft. I paid for 1A, and I'm staying. That did it. Celeste lifted her chin and tapped the intercom. Captain Reed, she said sweetly, we have a situation at the forward cabin. The word situation carried weight. Passengers shifted in their seats now, openly watching. A man across the aisle pulled out his phone, angling it subtly. Someone whispered, Is she serious? Arya stood still, heart steady. This was exactly where it was supposed to go. Footsteps echoed from the cockpit moments later. Captain Thomas Reed emerged. He was broad-shouldered, immaculate in his uniform, 4 gold stripes gleaming on his sleeves. His posture radiated authority, the kind that expected obedience simply by existing. Celeste moved to his side immediately, whispering rapidly. Arya caught fragments. Refusing instructions, delusional, forged ticket, disruptive. Captain Reed's jaw tightened with every word. He stepped forward, looming over Arya. Ma'am, I'm the commander of this aircraft. My purser tells me you're being combative and claiming a first-class seat that isn't yours. I haven't been combative. I've been observant. Reed scoffed. You've disrupted boarding and refused crew instructions. That makes you a safety issue. I'm seated in 1A, or I was until your staff reassigned me without cause. Reed didn't look at the boarding pass. I don't care what piece of paper you're holding, he snapped. I care about order, and right now, you're undermining it. So you're removing me based on hearsay and how I look? Reed's eyes flicked to her hoodie, then away. I'm asking you to leave voluntarily, or I'll have you removed. Removed how? Arya asked. Reed grabbed his radio. Security to gate 12. We have a non-compliant passenger, threat level medium. The cabin fell silent. Even Marjorie stopped smirking. A few passengers exchanged uneasy glances. Threat level medium for a woman holding a coffee and a canvas bag. Arya reached slowly into the pocket of her hoodie. Celeste flinched hard. She's reaching for something. Captain! Arya pulled out a small object and placed it gently on the fold-out tray beside seat 1A. It was heavy, black obsidian, polished smooth, edged in gold. Not a credit card, not a badge. Something else entirely. Captain Reed, Arya said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension like ice. Before security arrives, I suggest you check the updated ownership registry for Orax Skies. Reed frowned.
Specifically, she continued, the acquisition documents filed at 9 o'clock this morning. He hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he pulled his tablet from his flight bag, tapped, scrolled. The color drained from his face. His hands began to tremble. He looked at the tablet, then at the card, then back at Aria. Miss Blackwell? He whispered. Celeste laughed nervously. Captain, what is this nonsense? Just get her off. Shut up, Celeste, Reed snapped. The word echoed. The cabin gasped. Reed swallowed hard and turned fully toward Aria. I wasn't informed. The manifest hadn't updated the VIP flags. You were just shown exactly why I bought this airline, Aria said, standing slowly. She was smaller than him, but in that moment she owned the space. You weren't protecting a brand. You were indulging a power trip. You saw someone who didn't fit your idea of wealth and decided she didn't deserve respect. The jet bridge door banged open. 2 uniformed officers rushed in. Behind them, breathless, eager, stood Grant Holloway. There she is, Grant said, pointing. That's the one. The officers looked to Captain Reed. Captain, you called for extraction? Reed's mouth opened, then closed. Aria stepped forward. The captain made a mistake, but he's not who you're here for. Grant frowned. I'm Aria Blackwell, CEO of Altura Air Group, and as of this morning, the majority owner of Orax Skies. Silence. Grant's face drained of color. I'd like to file a formal complaint for harassment and for filing a false security report against Celeste Rowan and Grant Holloway. Grant staggered back a step. No, wait. Aria turned to him. You told me kiosks were for real passengers. As of 5 minutes ago, your credentials were revoked. She gestured lightly. You're terminated. One officer stepped between Grant and the exit. Celeste began to cry. You can't do this, she sobbed. I have 15 years of service. 15 years of bullying people who couldn't fight back. That ends today. She turned to Captain Reed. You'll fly this plane to Tokyo. I won't inconvenience the passengers. Reed nodded stiffly. But when we land, you'll hand over your wings. You're grounded permanently. Marjorie stared at her shoes. Aria looked at her last. And Mrs. Klein, enjoy that champagne. It's the last one you'll ever drink on this airline. Marjorie said nothing. The officers escorted Grant and Celeste off the aircraft. Aria sat back down in seat 1A, pulled up her hood, opened her laptop. Captain, she said without looking up, we're late. Reed swallowed. Yes, ma'am. The door closed. The quiet that followed was absolute. The door to the aircraft sealed shut with a low, pneumatic thud. It was a small sound, but in the silence that followed, it felt final. No one spoke. The first-class cabin, once filled with soft laughter, murmured deals, and the casual arrogance of people accustomed to being deferred to, had gone unnervingly still. Even the ambient hum of the engines felt subdued, as though the aircraft itself were listening. Aria Blackwell sat in seat 1A, hood pulled up, laptop open. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't need to. She could feel the shift. Moments earlier, she had been invisible, disposable, an inconvenience to be managed. Now, every eye in the cabin kept finding its way back to her and snapping away just as quickly. Fear had a temperature, and it was cold. Captain Thomas Reed returned to the cockpit without another word. His stride was rigid, mechanical, as though muscle memory was the only thing keeping him upright. The door slid shut behind him, sealing him away with his thoughts. The remaining flight attendants stood frozen for a beat too long. Then instinct kicked in. They moved. Fast. The younger attendants straightened their uniforms with trembling fingers. One hurried toward the galley, nearly colliding with another as they whispered urgently, "What do we do? Just, just do everything right." Their eyes darted back to seat 1A again. Arya typed calmly. Emails, memos, instructions that had been drafted weeks ago and saved as drafts, waiting for confirmation. Now they were being sent. Across departments, across continents. RX Skies was changing mid-flight. A man seated across the aisle cleared his throat. No one acknowledged him. He tried again. He said softly. "Excuse me." A flight attendant nearly sprinted to his side. "Yes, sir?" she asked, voice high with nerves. He glanced at Arya, then back at the attendant. "Is everything all right?" The attendant smiled too quickly. "Of course. Can I get you anything?" He hesitated. No, I'm fine." She nodded vigorously and retreated. Whispers spread in fragments. "That was the honor. Did you hear what she said to the captain? They fired them on the spot. Is this legal? Does it matter?" Marjorie Klein sat rigid in her seat, champagne flute untouched on the tray table in front of her. The smug ease she'd boarded with had evaporated completely. Her gold chains felt heavy now. She glanced toward Arya, then away again, jaw tight. A flight attendant approached her, slowly, carefully. "Mrs. Klein," the attendant said, hands clasped behind her back. "May I refresh your drink?" Marjorie looked up sharply. "No," she snapped. "I'm fine." The attendant nodded and backed away like she'd approached a wild animal. Further back, a tech executive leaned toward his seatmate. "Do you think they'll comp us?" he whispered. His seatmate shook his head. "I think we're lucky she didn't ground the plane." That comment spread. Lucky. As if the flight continuing was a favor, not a guarantee. Arya finished typing and closed her laptop. She finally looked up. The cabin stiffened. She didn't glare, didn't scowl. Her expression was neutral, almost bored. That was worse. She reached for her coffee cup, took a sip, and grimaced again. Still terrible. One of the attendants noticed immediately and hurried forward. "Miss Blackwell?" she said breathlessly. May I bring you something else? Fresh coffee? Tea? Anything?" Arya studied her. The woman was young, early 20s maybe. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. "Coffee would be fine," Arya said. Yes, of course," the attendant replied, already backing away. Immediately. Arya watched her go, then turned her gaze slowly across the cabin. She saw it now. The recalibration. People were reassessing every word they'd said, every look they'd shared, every moment they'd laughed while someone else was being humiliated. Power had rewritten the room. A man in the second row shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Klein?" he ventured. Arya looked at him. "Yes?" He swallowed. "I just wanted to say, what you did back there, that took courage." Arya tilted her head slightly. "No," she said, "it took ownership." The man flushed. "Right, of course." He leaned back, saying nothing more. Another passenger, an older woman with silver hair and a silk scarf, nodded toward Arya respectfully. "About time someone said something," she murmured. Arya gave her a small nod in return. Not everyone was afraid, but everyone was aware. The seatbelt sign chimed on. The engines roared to life. As the plane taxied toward the runway, the cabin crew moved with surgical precision. Drinks were poured without spills. Blankets were placed perfectly. Every interaction was polite, excessively so. Too careful. Arya noticed. Fear-based service was still bad service. She made a note. The aircraft lifted smoothly into the sky. Seattle disappeared beneath a blanket of clouds. For the first 30 minutes of flight, no one relaxed. Then the turbulence passed. The tension didn't. Arya reopened her laptop. She began reviewing internal footage, live feeds synced from the terminal, flagged moments highlighted in red. Grant Holloway's smirk, Celeste Rowan's sneer, the body language, the tone, patterns. She forwarded the clips to legal, then HR, then compliance. This wasn't about punishment. It was about correction. A shadow fell across her screen. She looked up. Captain Reed stood at the edge of the aisle. He looked smaller now. Not physically, but stripped of certainty. "Miss Klein," he said quietly, "may I speak with you?" Arya considered him for a long moment. Then she nodded toward the empty seat beside her. "Sit," she said. Reed hesitated, then obeyed. "I owe you an apology," he said, staring straight ahead. "You assumed authority equals accuracy," Arya finished. He nodded. "That's how it's always worked." "And that's the problem," Arya said. He swallowed. "I built my career on rules, on hierarchy." "You built it on obedience," Arya corrected. "There's a difference." Reed closed his eyes briefly. "What happens now?" he asked. "You fly, you land, and then you're done." He nodded. "I understand." She watched him stand and walk back to the cockpit. The cabin exhaled when he disappeared, but the relief didn't last, because everyone understood something now. The woman in the hoodie wasn't just watching, she was remembering. Hours passed. Dinner service came and went in near silence. The champagne flowed, but no one toasted. The flight felt longer than it should have. When dawn broke over the Pacific, painting the clouds gold, Arya finally leaned back and closed her eyes. Not to sleep, to think. This was only one flight, one crew, one test, and already the cracks were impossible to ignore. When the captain's voice finally came over the intercom, measured, formal, subdued, the cabin listened like students awaiting grades. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Tokyo." Arya opened her eyes. The real consequences were waiting on the ground. The descent into Tokyo was smooth. Too smooth. The aircraft sliced through the clouds with mechanical precision, the city slowly revealing itself beneath a veil of early morning haze. Skyscrapers emerged like steel spines. The runway lights blinked patiently, indifferent to the drama unfolding above them. Inside the cabin, no one spoke. Seatbelts clicked into place with near-silent obedience. Tray tables slid upright. Window shades were adjusted with careful, deliberate movements. Everyone followed the rules now. Arya Blackwell watched the city grow closer, reflected faintly in the dark glass of her window. Her face remained calm, unreadable, but her mind was working fast. On her laptop, notifications stacked quietly. Legal acknowledged, compliance initiating review, HR suspending credentials, regional director en route to Narita. Good. Captain Thomas Reed's voice came over the intercom. "Cabin crew, prepare for landing." It was steady, but thinner than before. As the wheels touched down with a controlled jolt, a collective breath released through the cabin. Applause did not follow. No one felt celebratory. The aircraft taxied toward the gate and stopped. Minutes passed. Whispers began again, low, cautious. "Why aren't we disembarking? Is there an issue?" Arya already knew the answer. Her phone vibrated. Regional director arrived. Airport authority notified. Media not yet alerted. She closed her laptop and stood. The cabin froze. Every movement she made still had gravity. A flight attendant hurried to her side. "Miss Blackwell," she said nervously, "we'll be docking shortly." "I know. I'll wait." She remained standing. The cockpit door opened. Captain Reed stepped out, followed by a man in a dark suit and Oryx Skies pin, the regional director. He was mid-40s, sharp-eyed, already sweating. "Miss Blackwell," he said quickly, "I'm Daniel Cho. You're late," Arya said calmly. Cho nodded, swallowing. "Traffic from headquarters. You were warned weeks ago. I flagged this airline for cultural failure." Cho glanced around the cabin. Passengers pretended not to listen. They all listened. "Yes," Cho said, "we underestimated the severity." Arya gestured toward the cockpit. "Captain Reed will brief you." Reed straightened, shoulders squared. "Sir," he said, "I failed to intervene. I accepted a false narrative because it aligned with my bias." The words sounded rehearsed. They weren't. Cho's jaw tightened. "Captain Reed," Arya said, "hand over your wings." Reed hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Then he reached up, removed the 4-striped insignia from his jacket, and placed it in Arya's open palm. The cabin inhaled sharply. "This flight was your last," Arya said. "You're grounded." Reed nodded once. Understood. He turned and walked down the aisle, past passengers who suddenly couldn't meet his eyes. At the front of the cabin, Marjorie Klein stiffened. Her moment was coming. Arya turned to Cho. "Now," she said, "we address the rest." Cho nodded quickly. "Yes, of course." He turned to the cabin, clearing his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, forcing a smile, "thank you for your patience. We'll begin disembarkation shortly." Arya raised a hand. "No," she said. Cho froze. "No?" he echoed. "Before anyone leaves," Arya said evenly, "there will be clarity." She faced the passengers fully now. "You witnessed misconduct today," she said. "Abuse of authority, discrimination, false security escalation." A few heads nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked relieved someone had finally named it. "This airline sold you an illusion, luxury, exclusivity, superiority." Her gaze swept the cabin. "What you saw instead was fear-based power, and that ends today." She turned to Cho. "Effective immediately," she said, "RX Skies will suspend cabin-based class enforcement pending review." Cho blinked. "You mean—" "I mean the curtains," Arya said. "They're coming down, permanently." A murmur rippled through the cabin. "Dress codes?" Cho asked cautiously. "Abolished. Priority? Redefined." Cho nodded rapidly, scribbling notes he'd never forget. Arya's eyes landed on Marjorie. "And as for passengers who believe wealth entitles them to cruelty," Marjorie's lips parted. "No, you are banned," Arya said flatly. "Lifetime." Marjorie stood up, trembling. "You can't do this," she hissed. "I've flown this airline for 20 years. And in 20 years, you learned nothing." The cabin was silent. Security appeared at the door. Marjorie sank back into her seat, defeated. Cho exhaled slowly. "We'll handle the paperwork," he said. Arya nodded. "Good." The door finally opened. Passengers disembarked in silence, slowly, respectfully, casting glances back at seat 1A as they passed. Some nodded. Some avoided her eyes. Some whispered. Phones buzzed. The story was already escaping the aircraft. When the cabin emptied, Arya shouldered her canvas duffel and walked toward the exit. Captain Reed stood near the door, stripped of rank, face pale. He looked at her once more. Why the hoodie? Why the test? Arya paused, hand on the rail, because systems only reveal their truth when they think no one important is watching. She stepped into the terminal. Cameras flashed somewhere behind her. She didn't look back. Behind her, RX Skies had lost control of its narrative, and the truth was airborne. By the time Arya Blackwell stepped into Narita International Airport, the story was already moving faster than she was. Not because she wanted it to, but because truth, once exposed, rarely waits for permission. She moved through the terminal like any other arriving passenger. Canvas duffel over her shoulder, hoodie still pulled low. The fluorescent lights reflected off polished floors, and the hum of early morning arrivals blended with rolling suitcases and multilingual announcements. No escort, no press conference, yet phones were already out. Not aimed at her yet, but buzzing in hands, vibrating in pockets, lighting up faces with the same headline forming in real time across continents. She felt it in the air, the shift from incident to event. Behind her, the flight crew from Orex Skies was being quietly separated. Statements were taken, badges collected, digital access revoked. The regional director spoke in hushed, urgent tones to airport authorities. And somewhere, 35,000 feet behind them in time, a passenger-uploaded video finished processing. The clip was shaky, vertical, poorly framed, but devastating. It showed Celeste Rowan blocking the aisle. Her words were unmistakable, her sneer impossible to misinterpret. They didn't pay $30,000 to share oxygen with someone dressed like that. The caption was simple. Airline humiliates woman in first class, then realizes who she is. Within 20 minutes, it crossed 1 million views. Arya reached the curb outside the terminal and stopped. She checked her phone. Messages stacked endlessly. Board members, legal counsel, PR teams she hadn't even approved yet. She ignored most of them. One message, however, she opened. Global comms. Narrative breaking. We can contain it if we act now. Arya typed a reply. Don't contain it. Release everything. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Are you sure? Arya didn't hesitate. Yes, truth doesn't need damage control. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and walked toward the taxi stand. Inside the terminal, televisions flickered. At first, it was just a crawl at the bottom of the screen. Then a panel discussion interrupted regular programming. By the time Arya reached her hotel an hour later, her name was everywhere. Altura Air CEO exposes elitism mid-flight. Luxury airline faces backlash after CEO's undercover test. Standards or prejudice? Viral incident sparks industry-wide debate. Arya checked into her room without incident. The receptionist bowed politely, unaware or pretending to be. She closed the door behind her and finally sat down. The silence was welcome. Her phone rang. She answered without looking. Yes? You broke the internet, said a familiar voice. It was Lena Moreau, Altura Air Group's general counsel. I didn't. Your industry did. There was a pause. Lawsuits are already forming. Wrongful termination claims, discrimination countersuits, defamation threats. And? Arya asked. And, Lena continued, we're positioned to win, but only if you're prepared for what comes next. Arya leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I am, she said. They won't be. After the call ended, Arya opened her laptop. The footage was worse than she remembered, not because it showed cruelty, but because it showed confidence. Grant Holloway's smirk, Celeste Rowan's certainty, Captain Reed's unquestioned authority. None of them expected consequences. That was the real indictment. She forwarded the final batch of files. Internal memos leaked to the press. Unredacted training manuals. customer complaints that had been quietly closed for brand protection. By noon, a second wave hit. Former employees spoke out, anonymous at first, then not. Stories poured in. Gate agents pressured to redirect certain passengers. Cabin crew encouraged to protect ambiance. Pilots told to trust purser judgment over passenger complaints. The illusion cracked. Stock analysts reacted fast. Oryx Sky's valuation dipped. Altura Air Groups rose. Investors liked decisive leadership. They loved public accountability. Arya didn't watch the markets. She watched a people. A live interview played on her hotel TV. A former Oryx flight attendant, face partially shadowed. "I quit because I couldn't take it anymore," the woman said. "We were trained to smile while humiliating people." The interviewer leaned in. "And why speak now?" "Because now someone powerful finally said it was wrong." Arya muted the television. Her phone buzzed again. A text message. Unknown number. "You ruined my life." Arya stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Another message arrived seconds later. "You think you're a hero? You're just another tyrant." She didn't respond. Power always felt like injustice to those who'd abused it first. By evening, the Aviation Authority issued a formal statement. An industry-wide audit was announced. Other airlines scrambled. PR teams released hollow apologies. Executives promised internal reviews. Arya smiled grimly. Reviews were meaningless without consequence. Her door knocked softly. She opened it to find Daniel Cho, the regional director, standing stiffly in the hallway. "They're calling it the Blackwell test," he said. "Good," Arya replied. "It should be named." Cho hesitated. "Some board members are nervous," he admitted. "They think you went too far." Arya met his eyes. "They're free to leave." Cho nodded. "There's something else," he said. "The press wants a statement, not a press release. You." Arya considered that. She hadn't planned to speak, but silence now could be mistaken for control. "Tomorrow," she said. "One statement, no questions." Cho exhaled in relief. "Yes, ma'am." That night, Arya stood by the window of her hotel room, Tokyo glowing beneath her like a circuit board of light. The world was watching now, not just her, but the system she'd exposed. And tomorrow she would make sure they understood one thing clearly. This wasn't revenge, it was correction.
Consequences never arrived all at once. They came in waves. The first wave hit before Arya Blackwell finished her morning coffee. By sunrise in Tokyo, Oryx Sky's corporate headquarters in New York was already in crisis mode. Board members joined emergency calls from glass offices and private residences. Screens filled with grim faces, legal counsel speaking in clipped sentences, while PR teams whispered frantically in side chats. The phrase, brand damage, was used 13 times in the first 10 minutes. Arya listened. Then she spoke. "You're worried about the wrong thing," she said calmly. The room went quiet. "This wasn't brand damage," she continued. "This was brand exposure. The damage already existed. I just turned the lights on." A board member cleared his throat. "With respect," he said, "the speed of your actions, terminations, bans, grounding a captain, were overdue," Arya cut in, "and they were justified." Another voice chimed in. "Public opinion is volatile. We could have handled this internally." Arya leaned forward. "That's what you've been doing for years, internally, quietly, ineffectively." Silence again. Then legal spoke. "3 wrongful termination claims have been filed. Grant Holloway, Celeste Rowan, Captain Reed is considering action as well." Arya nodded. "Expected." "And the passenger ban?" Lena added. "Marjorie Klein has retained counsel." Arya allowed herself a thin smile. "She's welcome to."
The call ended shortly after. No one challenged her authority. Not anymore. Celeste Rowan didn't leave her apartment for 2 days. Her phone stayed face down on the kitchen counter, vibrating relentlessly like a trapped insect. When she finally looked, the damage was total. The video of her blocking the aisle had been clipped, subtitled, slowed down, her words analyzed, her tone dissected. Former colleagues spoke anonymously to reporters. She was known for it. She enjoyed it. She called it protecting the vibe. Her 15 years of service meant nothing now. Airlines quietly removed her from candidate pools. Hospitality groups declined interviews. The image of perfection she'd built collapsed in a single news cycle. Celeste cried, then raged, then cried again. By the end of the week, she deleted her social media accounts entirely. It didn't help. The internet remembered. Captain Thomas Reed packed his office in silence. His locker was cleared under supervision. His wings, once polished daily, now sat in a cardboard box, stripped of meaning. He'd flown for 28 years. Military background, commercial excellence, thousands of hours in the air. None of it protected him. He sat in his car afterward, staring at the steering wheel. Not angry, just hollow. When reporters asked for comment, he declined. When his pension was adjusted to account for legal exposure, he didn't argue. For the first time in his career, authority hadn't saved him. Marjorie Klein tried to fight. She called executives she'd known for years. They didn't answer. She threatened lawsuits. Her lawyers advised against it. The band stood, quietly, ruthlessly. She was escorted off an Orex flight 2 weeks later when she attempted to board under a different booking name. The video didn't go viral. It didn't need to. Humiliation didn't always require an audience. The second wave of consequences hit the industry. Other airlines scrambled to audit their own policies. Training manuals were rewritten overnight. Ambience protection vanished from official language. Dress code enforcement quietly disappeared. Executives released apology statements filled with phrases like learning moment and commitment to inclusivity. Aria watched them with measured skepticism. Words were easy. Systems were harder. So she changed the system. At RX Skies, soon to be renamed, mandatory rotations were introduced. Executives shadowed gate agents. Pilots attended customer service simulations. Anonymous reporting tools were given real power. And for the first time, complaints from passengers who didn't look the part were weighted more, not less. The third wave came quietly. Letters, emails, messages from passengers who had once been humiliated and never spoken up. Thank you. I thought it was just me. I stopped flying for years because of what happened to me. Aria read every one, late at night, alone. This was the part no headline covered. 2 weeks later, the aircraft was rolled into a hangar. The old RX Skies logo was removed from the fuselage, piece by piece. Paint stripped, identity erased. When it emerged, the branding was simple, clean, bold. Just one word, Altura. No elite, no hierarchy, no illusion. Aria stood on the tarmac as the first rebranded aircraft prepared for departure. She wore a suit this time, not because she had to, but because she chose to. A flight attendant approached her, nervous, respectful, genuine. "Miss Blackwell," she said, "thank you for staying." Aria met her eyes. "Thank you for changing," she replied. As the plane lifted into the sky, Arya knew something important. Justice wasn't loud. It didn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looked like accountability written into policy. And sometimes, 3 months later, Arya Blackwell boarded another flight. Same airport, same terminal, different airline. The glass and steel cathedral hadn't changed. The polished floors still reflected overhead lights. The departures board still flickered with promises of elsewhere. But the people had. Arya wore a hoodie again. Not the same one. This one was newer, cleaner, but still unmistakably casual. No entourage, no announcement. Just a woman with a carry-on and a boarding pass tucked into her pocket. She approached the check-in counter. The agent smiled. Not the sharp, measuring smile she'd seen before. A real one. "Good morning," the agent said. "Where are you headed today?" "London," Arya replied. The agent typed, then paused. "You're in 1A, she said. "Would you like assistance with anything?" "No," Arya said. "This is perfect." No hesitation, no judgment, no second look. Arya thanked her and walked away. That was how change was measured, not in headlines, but in moments no one thought were being watched. Altura Air didn't become perfect. That was never the goal. What it became instead was accountable. Every crew member knew the story now, not as gossip, but as policy. It was part of onboarding, part of training, part of culture. The Altura test, they called it. Not officially, but everyone knew. It wasn't about clothes or money or power. It was about what happened when you thought someone had none. Across the industry, things shifted, quietly. Airlines stopped using words like ambiance enforcement. Gate agents were trained to de-escalate, not dominate. Security calls required documentation, not ego. And passengers noticed. Not the wealthy ones who had always been comfortable, the others, the ones who had learned to shrink themselves in airports, to dress appropriately, to speak softly, to avoid eye contact. They stopped shrinking. Arya never gave another interview. She didn't need to. The footage still circulated from time to time, resurfacing whenever a new scandal broke. People shared it with the same caption over and over again. "This is how it should be handled." Some called her a hero. She disliked that word. Heroes were admired. Systems needed to be fixed. She kept flying, sometimes in a suit, sometimes in a hoodie, always in 1A. Not as a warning, but as a reminder that the person you dismiss, the one you mock, the one you decide doesn't belong, might be the one who owns the sky. Justice, Arya had learned, wasn't loud. It didn't always clap back in the moment. Sometimes it waited, watched, and rewrote the rules forever. If this story made you uncomfortable, good. That's how change starts. Because somewhere out there, someone is being judged right now by their clothes, their accent, their silence, or the way they don't look important enough. And if you've ever been underestimated, this story was for you. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment if you've ever witnessed or experienced this kind of treatment. Like this video so more people hear this story. Share it because the next person being judged might not have a voice yet. And remember, the person you disrespect today might be the one who decides your fate tomorrow. Subscribe for more stories where power gets exposed and justice always boards last.